past few weeks since North Korea surprisingly on 22 May announced through its externally oriented media, KCNA, that a major catastrophic accident happened in the process of trying to launch this warship. Today, I'm happy to be here with a senior fellow for CSIS, Joseph Bermudez. As many of you know, has been leading the analysis of the imagery available of this event, and we'll look at some of these images that have happened to better understand the context of this disaster for North Korea.
Thank you, Sid. I appreciate that. Let's start with an image of the launch of the first Choe. That's the name the North Koreans have given to this new destroyer. This destroyer happens to be the largest ship North Korea has ever produced. It is also the most modern and one of the more capable vessels that North Korea has launched for its naval forces. In this image from April, the launch of the Hyon, we see a number of very interesting things. If I start here at the bottom, we see what we would normally call a helicopter landing deck. However, given North Korea's emphasis on UAVs, okay, we assume that they will also use UAVs from the vessel. Moving further towards the bow, we see several hatches, large hatches down here, small hatches here. These are vertical launch systems for various types of ballistic missiles. The larger hatches, we believe, are for naval missiles, such as the ones they've produced for their ballistic missile submarines. The smaller ones appear to be either for land attack cruise missiles or for air defense missiles.
So just to be clear, this is a Choe that was successfully launched off of the west coast.
At Wonsan. I'm sorry, Nampo, in April of last month. What's interesting is North Korea, people who discuss North Korea always give this statement that it's likely that Russia supplied, North Korea with technology or equipment or weapons. The North Korean capabilities are increasing dramatically because of Russian assistance. That's probably overstating it a considerable amount, but in this case, we actually see that they have. Here is an air defense system called the Pantsir S-1. It's a Russian-designed close-in air defense system, and it appears that it's an exact copy, or it is an actual example, delivered by Russia and is being used on this destroyer.
So in other words, this was not reverse engineered, this was not built with Russian assistance, but probably represents a complete system that Russia gifted or sold to North Korea.
I would say yes. When we saw a couple of close-ups, up here in the display tent, they had a system available for visitors to see in person of the Pantsir, and it looks bolt for bolt to be an identical system.
So you've been looking at this ship for a while,
yes.
Even before it was launched. Did you look at maybe retrospectively at imagery to see whether you could see the Pantsir and when it first appeared? Or
I looked, but it didn't appear until it was actually launched, which is typical of North Korea. They're great at propaganda. They're great about showing you something and wanting you to assume the worst, or in their case, the best. They're showing you something because they want you to believe something.
Right.
It isn't always the truth, but that's what they're great at propaganda.
So this has been launched, it's been taken out for an initial weapons demonstration?
Yeah, it was pulled out into the bay at Nampo, and it tested each one of the major weapon systems. For example, the 127 millimeter gun turret in the front fired several rounds. The forward vertical launch systems right here in these hatches also launched a few missiles, and so did these in the stern, and the anti-submarine weapons on the port and starboard sides fired some rounds. So, but we don't know if it actually moved on its own power or was it moved out by tug. We just don't know that.
So they've made two of these at least. One we saw successfully launched, and the other dismally failed during the launch. So could you walk through what exactly happened?
Gladly. I just want to point out that this took place on the West Coast at the Nampo Naval Base and Naval Shipyard. The second one is seen here on the East Coast at the port of Chongjin, the Hamburg or North.
That's somewhat north along the East Coast.
Yes,
closer
exactly.
to Russia than to
Yes, very much
South
so.
Korea.
Two things to note here before we go into detail is that the Hamburg shipyard hasn't produced large warships at all. Okay, it's primarily known for producing fishing vessels,
Right.
Several fishing factories, a few merchant vessels, small submersible vessels for infiltration into Japan and South Korea, things of that nature. Nothing large. Okay? This is not only the largest vessel being produced in North Korea, it is also the first time it's produced a large warship like this. The second thing, aside from the shipyard, is North Korea normally launches its vessels, whether commercial or civilian, either bow first or stern first, depending upon the shipyard. Sometimes they built them, move them into floating dry docks, and then the floating dry dock submerges and the boat floats.
With the ship oriented perpendicular to the coast so that
Yes.
it just goes out.
Exactly. So this is a pre-launch image taken on May 12th of this month. And what we see are a number of interesting things. We see that there's netting over a number of areas.
Right.
We also see the position down here, the reddish position. That'll be where the 127 millimeter gun turret is. But the things of greatest interest are here and here. These are openings for the vertical launch missile systems. They haven't been installed completely. You can see that they're partially installed here, not installed there. And the hatches themselves haven't been installed.
So in essence, they're launching a partially outfitted vessel with the Choe, where the first Choe launch was fully fitted. It had all
As well as could be.
may or probably not missiles actually loaded, but nevertheless, you saw the Pantsir system. Here you don't see it.
That is correct.
Vertical launch system cells not yet installed. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it isn't painted nicely either. This is prior to launch. So this is going to be launched sideways. We call this, and you can see down here, you can see the lines going this way on the underneath the vessel. This is what we call a side slipway. A slipway is where you let a vessel slip into the water. This is sideways. And the whole vessel is supposed to smoothly slide into the water. As it slides, it'll, when it hits the water, it'll tilt over, then pop up if it's balanced correctly. Okay? This is like a week before, 10 days before it was actually
Was the
tried to
observation stand already erected?
no, the observation stand was going to be here, and we'll
Okay.
see it in some of the later image. This gantry crane will be moved way to the west, and it'll all be clear. This one will stay where it is.
Good.
And I think that's about it for this. Let's move forward. So, okay, you'll have to pardon me. So this is when they launched it. They launched it on the 21st. This image was taken on the 22nd. What has happened is that you can see the tracks, okay? They started rolling it off. They released the brakes or the chocks holding the bogies, and it slid, started going good. However, the bow didn't slide correctly, and it got hung up on the slipway, causing the whole vessel to rotate slightly, and this portion went underwater. This remained on the slipway. This is not good.
So this crane barge was not present when initially the vessel should have come off, if it had come off correctly, probably along this line, right?
It would have come off parallel, like you had mentioned
Right.
before. This crane barge was moved away
Okay.
for the actual launch.
Any thoughts as to why an incomplete vessel would be rushed to a launch?
To meet a deadline, an arbitrary political deadline. That's probably what happened. And Kim, in his excitement in his speech for the launch of the first Chonhun, at Nampo, which we just talked about building more of these vessels, having them on the West Sea as well as the East Sea Fleet.
And it would give the impression of a rapid or robust construction capability
Yes.
to the outside world to have the shock of two of these launched within a month of each other,
Yes,
roughly.
And we can't rule out the potential for another one of these to be launched up at Nanjing, all the way in the northeast corner of North Korea, at the Nanjing number 28 shipyard, because that shipyard is building warships for many years and has a great deal of expertise and launches vertical down the slipway.
Right.
We don't see it. We don't see any evidence of that because we can't look into the building. And we have to go back now and look at the parts yard to see if parts are being moved in. It would not be unreasonable to assume that down at Nampo, construction of another one is started at this point. So this is a disaster. This is no good at all. And what we see here are some flotation bags, maritime salvage balloons, flotation bags. It indicates that there was a rapid response in 24 hours. We see some level of response. They covered with tarps so we wouldn't see any damage. We wouldn't see what they were doing because they know we look. They know that various countries around the world have classified satellites. And they know that civilian satellites, like the image we used here from Airbus, can capture things in great detail, as you can see. You can see cranes on the deck, on the slipway. You can see the crane barge. We can see the balloons. We can see, activity here happening. And they wanted to hide some of that so we would not have an understanding of what's going on and how long it'll take to completely salvage the vessel. Let me go forward. This is a more recent image taken on the 26th of May. And we see now the tarps have been closed in around the vessel more tightly, and we can get a better image. We see the bow fairing for the sonar. We can see the superstructure. We see that no turret is mounted, as we saw on the Choe when it was launched. We don't see anything up here like the pansier system. We do see the superstructure. We see part of the mast. And we see lots of balloons, and we see some small vessels around here. The balloons are actually interesting. Typically, you would see small balloons like this for small, like a small fishing vessel. For a vessel this big, you would want to see larger ones. Okay? We see that none of the we don't see the pansier system. We don't see anything else other in the outline of what's available. We don't see any gaping holes apparently anywhere along the side. Difficult to tell because of the tarps. And what this does show is, however, is that this is going to be a challenge to correct. The reason being is we have the bow. This is the stern, the rear. This is the bow. And it's still stuck on the slipway. If they were to just try to push it off, which would be a challenge, they could raise it a little and try to push it off. You're going to damage you're going to damage the fairing for the sonar. If there's a sonar in there now, you're going to damage that. And you could damage the forward hull. So what they'll likely do is try to lift this somehow, maybe put some cribbing, think of large pieces of wood in a box underneath. They'll lift it and gradually raise it a little. That'll give it some movement down this way. And once it's down, they'll likely try to use the large maritime salvage bags, balloons, to right it. At that point, they can get in and see what damage that is really done. What's interesting is if we look at the overview image of this shows the vessel here. We don't see much detail. You can see equipment here on the deck. But what's interesting is that down here in the channel, where there was no activity whatsoever at all, in the prior images, they've started dredging operations. This suggests that the failure to launch and the sensitivity of ensuring a successful launch and the successful moving of the vessel out of the harbor, the Hyon harbor, they want to make sure that the channel is dredged deep enough. It also may be an indication that they might bring in a floating dry dock once this is righted, move it onto a floating dry dock, and then pull the floating dry dock out of here to another facility to finish construction. It's a challenge.
The good news for North Korea, if there's any good news, is this doesn't reflect any type of design flaw with the vessel itself. It's just simply the equipment and the procedures for launching the vessel. North Korea has officially announced 4 individuals who are going to be held responsible. They all appear to be senior officials, a vice department director from the munitions industry department, and then other managers. It doesn't mean people below them won't be punished, but for now, this is probably not a major setback for North Korea's maritime force enhancements objectives.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The 4 people mentioned range, like you correctly state, from Vice Director of the Military Industrial Department or Munitions Industry Department. And he had really no, he's just the person they got a pin with. But as you went down, you got to local shipyard people. My off-the-cuff estimate is what happened is this. I mentioned that this is a sideways slip.
Right.
North Korea doesn't typically launch that way for warships. And it's the longest vessel that North Korea has produced. So when you bring like a small fishing vessel out here, it only takes up the middle rails. So those have been exercised, everybody knows what to do. In this case, they needed the entire length, okay? And the ones at either end, the bogies and the rails, you need to go out and maintain them.
Right.
And probably what happened was they weren't maintained properly or weren't inspected properly.
Or were designed for a smaller vessel.
Right, not as big a vessel, absolutely.
You know, it's interesting because you would ask yourself the question, you know, first of all, I'm not an expert, but as to look, why 3 separate shipyards being used where economies of scale and, you know, as a single centralization would aid in quality control.
Right.
And then secondly, you know, the big splash, no pun intended, of a launch sideways is probably something that at some point somebody in the chain of command, probably vetted all the way to the top to Kim Jong-un himself, said, this is how we want to do it. And, you know, we'll have all the cameras rolling, we'll be out there, and, you know, the normal way would be to try to do it through a regular launch. We'll do this, and we'll show the world. And so, to a degree, Kim Jong-un shares likely a bit of the blame for why this unfortunate event took place.
I think you touched upon some excellent points. The construction here at the Hamburg shipyard suggests that there was a decision at the highest level, maybe Kim himself, that he wants destroyers launched as quickly as possible.
Right.
Okay? The fact that, you know, it would be very dramatic to watch this launch. If you ever seen a side slipway launch, the vessel comes down like this, sliding down, hits the water, and then goes like this.
Almost 70 degrees or so
down. And then bounces
down,
up and swings back. It's very dramatic, and it certainly would have looked good on the video. I would have loved to have seen it. And I think that adds to it. And yes, I believe that Kim and the other senior party members deserve some of the blame because of the desire to rush.
Now, you recently, or in the process of releasing a book on North Korea's sea-based nuclear deterrent, and it seems like, although probably it'll require a second edition to fully address both the successful Choe and now this one, you know, what is ultimately North Korea hoping to achieve with the launching of these destroyers? What do you think their role would be, either in kind of armistice state coercive provocations, such as the sinking of the Chonan, or maybe enforcing sea boundaries on the West Coast, and in case of an actual conflict?
Wow, there's a lot there. I I think a good part of it goes to when Kim assumed power, 2011 or so. Shortly afterwards, he made a policy statement where he wanted to bring the military up to modern levels. And one thing we saw was that he immediately went around to air bases, Navy bases, and he made senior commanders go swim in the ocean or fly, fighter maneuvers.
He inherited a broken KPA
Right.
in many ways, and he's been trying to fix it.
Absolutely. He was looking for real tech capability as opposed to whatever he's been telling him.
Right.
And he found a lot of deficits. That way we saw a lot of senior leadership in the military moved out, and younger, more technocrats move into those positions. And we've seen a steady expansion of military capabilities at this point. The other thing, he wants to project a mighty and powerful nation.
Right.
He wants to expand his ability to reach East Asia and eventually the United States, to use that in bargaining or just in threatening.
So it's a credible nuclear threat.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
As well as a credible conventional threat. I imagine a situation, crab season comes along on the West Coast. There's a lot of Chinese vessels down there, North Korean, and North Korea seeks to challenge the northern limit line. Tensions rise in the region, and the Choe slowly goes out, or quickly goes out. And then suddenly we're asking ourselves, what is the range of those missiles? Will they work? Do they have nuclear warheads or not? And so he's got a nuclear deterrent that he can deploy, yet one short of warranting maybe a preemptive strike.
Exactly.
Because I imagine all conflict, this is a sitting duck.
Yes, pretty much so.
Yeah.
Given the capabilities of the U.S. Navy, the ROC Navy, and the Japanese Navy, it wouldn't last long in an all-out conflict for sure. However, we touched upon the nuclear option. They demonstrated in the launch at the Choe down in Nampo that cruise missiles can be launched. Some of the cruise missiles they've demonstrated already have ranges of several thousand miles.
Wow.
They are large enough, and North Korea has quite bluntly stated they're nuclear armed. There's no reason why these wouldn't be nuclear armed. So it's a great challenge.
And as somebody who's been watching North Korea for decades now, you know that often they proclaim and claim capabilities that aren't fully tested, that aren't fully demonstrated, that leave you kind of questioning almost a semi-Potemkin nature. It's not entirely real, but it's not entirely all fake either. They eventually get to where they want to go.
Exactly.
And so over time, there'll be less catastrophic launches, more confidence in the ballistic missiles that would be launching out of those tubes, maybe a seventh nuclear test that would increase confidence in the miniaturization of warheads that would be used on a vessel like this. So this is a real threat today, but it will be one that grows going forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. Those are all excellent points. So going back to the idea of a Potemkin type situation, the vessel that was launched down in Nampo, we saw it moved offshore. We don't know how, whether it did it on its own power or whether tugs moved it out there and anchored it.
Right.
It conducted, weapons tests. Right. You don't normally do that until the vessel is actually really prepared and gone through sea trials and
the crew's trained. And
exactly.
It's,
This was purely a propaganda move. Does it mean it has real capabilities? Potentially, yes. And eventually, I would say yes. The real question is when you have a modern warship, which this appears to be, systems integration. North Korea has been historically, and probably still is, very poor at systems integration.
Right.
And these present challenges. Target acquisition, these...
Well, you got the UAV launch pad.
Yes,
right?
that's true.
That helps.
The launch, the test flight was last month, I believe, of a modified IL-76 transport in an airborne early warning control type mode was meant to imply that it has greater surveillance capabilities, maybe even targeting capabilities. Not necessarily. An aircraft that takes off and lands doesn't give you real capabilities.
Yeah.
It shows a potential. And that's what these vessels are right now.
Right.
Same with the new submarine that they launched. It was launched, big ceremony, lots of great video. It was taken into a graving dock, basically a dry dock on land. It was worked on for months, pulled out and moved back to a secure boat basin, hasn't done anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't even practiced a missile launch.
Right.
These are capabilities in the building or nascent capabilities. I'm not sure how we'd want to phrase it, but they're not true capabilities in being at the moment.
Right. That's very good. And the other thing we haven't talked about, we won't talk too much about it, is that over time with Russian help, throughout the conventional force, air, ground, Navy assets, UAVs, command and control, systems integration, space launch, satellite, all of this, North Korea now has a conduit towards better, more reliable capabilities over time. And this is why international efforts to try to halt or contain Russia-DPRK cooperation going forward are so great. Well, we're out of time.
Okay.
I thank you so very much, Joe. Every
Thank you.
time I read you or meet you, I learn so much. And thank you for the great work that you've done for CSIS and the larger community dependent on your insights. So
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure, and thank you.